Welcome back to Speducation. I'm your host, Brandon Reed, and if this is your first time to the channel, welcome, a special welcome to you. And in this channel, we talk a little bit about special education, about the different parts of special education, and over the past few weeks, we've been talking about the different parts of an IEP. So today, we're going to continue with that, and we're going to look at two more sections of the IEP. So let's dive into the lesson. So today's topic, parts of an IEP, week 4. Today we will look at provisions, the special education services. Basically, that's another way of saying provisions is the services that we provide. Related services. These are services that are in relation to the provisions. So these are extra services that are provided based on the student's need. All right, let's take a look at provisions. So when we're talking about provisions, we might be talking about transition, because if the student is 13 or older, then we have to do what is called transition services. And this is basically us talking about what are the services that we're going to provide to the student to help them reach their transitional goals. Okay, so this might be, the student is provided support in researching a career in the field of veterinary services, or the student will use strategies you learned in the special ed setting to research a career in the auto industry. Okay, this is where we would do that. And as you can see, the narrative, which is basically what I was giving you, that goes in the description. The by whom is going to talk typically about the teacher, the student, the teacher of record, or the guidance counselor. And then it will explain to support what, and then what is the completion date. And the thing with transition services is you typically only do those once per transition year. So the goal or the completion date should end by the next annual case conference. And all of that information goes in here. Now, depending on the description of the service, okay, you might have more than one transition goal. And in that case, you would follow the same principle. And then you would also document any written information presented to the parent and student regarding available adult services. This might include such things as vocational rehab. And if you're wondering, I've heard that before, vocational rehab, what does that mean? Well, we'll get into that in a later video, but it's basically a service that is provided for adults with disabilities. They could help you pay rent. They could help you find a job. They could even help you pay for college. And that especially is good for students. So as they start getting into high school and get closer to graduation, that might be something that you look into. But any information that we provide about vocational rehab services or any other adult services, we would actually put in here, and we would describe what information was given to the parent. Provisions continued. So on here, this is special education services. So this is where we fill out what is the description of the service that we're providing. Now, if a student is requiring academic support in the general ed classroom, it might say something like the student will receive academic support for mathematical functions or for decoding and reading comprehension. That might be what the description is, okay? The proposed initiation date, that's going to be the date that we hold the case conference. So if we held it today, it would be August 28th, 2023. The number of sessions talks about how many times we will meet with the student or provide the service. And typically, if we have a 5-day school week, we might say student will receive support 4 times per week for 25 minutes or for 30 minutes, okay? That doesn't mean that we only meet with them for 4 days for 30 minutes and that's it. That just means that's the bare minimum services that we can provide. So in case the school gets closed down because of a snow day, okay, we're still meeting their needs because we've met with them 4 days for 30 minutes. Okay. And then, of course, the time per session, that's the amount of time. And again, this really depends on the school and how they set up their services. But generally, it's anywhere between 10 to 30 to 45 minutes, depending. And then the service end date, that is the next annual case conference. So if the proposed initiation date was August 28th, 2023, the end date would be August 28th, 2024. And then the location, is this service going to be provided in the general ed setting or in the special ed setting? If it's in the general ed setting, then in the description, I would state that and say the student will be provided academic support in the general ed classroom. Or if it's in the special ed setting, then the student will be provided academic support or tutoring support in the special ed setting. And then it says align to post-secondary goal. So this is kind of like for transition services. So if the student is of transition age, then we would say, is this an academic or is this an independent living skill goal? Or is this an employment and training skill goal? And then we would mark that. Related services. This is what we're going to get into next. But related services are services that, in addition to the special ed services that we provide in the general education classroom, these are additional services that we are providing. And so just like the special ed services, we would fill out the same kinds of things. What is the description of the service, the proposed initiation date, the end date, the number of sessions or the number of times that we meet with the student, the times per session, where's the location, and then how does this relate to the secondary goal? So related services. So these are some examples of related services, such as transportation. If the student requires special transportation, there are some students that really have difficulty riding on a normal bus. And it isn't necessarily because of behavior. It might be because the student can't stand the loud noises, or the student needs additional support. You know, maybe they have a wheelchair, and so they need special ed transportation. That would be a related service. Accessible materials. That would require any kind of instructional materials provided in an accessible format. So maybe a textbook, but with large print. That would be accessible materials. Assistive technology, that would be any kind of assistive technology. For example, I once had a student that needed, he was blind and low vision. So he wasn't blind, but his vision was very, very bad. And so he needed a special laptop that provided more bigger buttons so that he could see, and then a larger screen format so that he could see better. That would be assistive technology. Or, you know, some sort of cochlear implant. I mean, that would be assistive technology as well to help with the student. And then extended school year. Although most schools, they do have like summer school, extended school year would not be summer school. This is if the student is going to have difficulty retaining the information, and because of that, they might need an extended school year to help with that. It's very rare, if ever, that a student needs this, but depending on the disability of the student, this is something that schools might consider doing. And then, of course, aids and supports, document the types and general intent of the supports necessary to provide public agency personnel with knowledge and skills. Typically, what I will do is I will create an Excel document that will allow this to be shared with the general ed staff, and then they can go in and see the student's name, see what disability they have, and then see the accommodations that are listed for that student, so that not only do the general ed teachers know, but also the instructional assistants as well. And this is a good area to share that with them. And you're going to explain what it is that you share, or how do you share that. And of course, this continues on to the next page. Program modifications. Describe any program modifications needed to enable the student to advance appropriately toward attaining the goals. So program modifications might be for individuals with blind or low vision who are deaf or hard of hearing, especially for those students that might be in a wheelchair. There might be program modifications that might need to be added to that, especially for gym class. And then, of course, students with learning disabilities. If the disability is severe enough that they need to modify the program, then this is where we would put that. And we would describe the type of modification that we are making to the student's class or to their day, and we would describe that and put that in here. And then progress reporting. Describe when periodic reports on the progress the student is making toward meeting the annual goal will be provided. Typically, that is once per 9 weeks. That's when we send out progress reports, and you will be either receiving it through the email or by it being sent home or by being by mailed home, snail mail. And basically, this kind of gives a rundown of how the student has done this 9 weeks and how they're doing on their goal and what areas they're struggling with and what areas they've improved on. And then the rationale for the services. So you're describing why are we providing the services and why did we reject others? So generally in this, we might say, well, the services that we provide, the data that we have suggests that the services that we're providing more than meet the student's need. Any other services would be too restrictive, or any fewer services would not be enough. So this is where we describe why we chose the services that we did and why we rejected others. And to continue on with related services, does the student require an emergency evacuation plan? So if a student is in a wheelchair, they might require an emergency evacuation plan because, obviously they can't use the stairs. So maybe they need to use the elevator, or maybe there's another way of getting them in or out of the building. Or if a student has anxiety or has ASD, autism spectrum disorder, they might need an emergency evacuation plan because the loud noises and the alarms kind of set them off. So there needs to be a plan in place. If there is a plan needed, this is where we would put it. And then we would also make sure that you knew where it was located in the student's file. Does the student require a health plan? If the student has a health plan, such as epilepsy, or they have some sort of seizures, or they have low blood sugar, we need to know where that plan is located. And typically it would be in the student's in their personal file, but also in the file in the office. And does the student require a crisis plan? This is typically for students that may have ED, emotionally disabled, or EH, emotionally handicapped. And if that plan, if there is a plan for that, then again, where is this located? Okay, it should be in the special ed teacher's file, but it can also be located in the permanent files in the office. And that brings us to the end of today's lesson. So next week, we will talk about LRE, least restrictive environment, as well as general considerations. Okay, what are those? Well, we'll find out about that next week. And if you liked what you saw, please click the like button. And if you want updates on future videos, feel free to click the subscribe button and ring the bell for updates on future videos. And as always, if you have questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comments section, and I'll try to answer those next time. And until next time, class dismissed.